Yes, do they have?
Thank you.
The leaders, at least, of the different constituencies. Uteboko, from the South African Union of Students, is the Deputy President. You all know Professor Habib, who is here in his capacity as Chair of Universities South Africa. Mr. Bigwana, who is here as he's Chair of Council at Cape Peninsula University of Technology, but he's here as in his capacity, Bigwane, he's chair of the University Council's Chairpersons Forum, and then our DG, representing government. Today I convened a meeting of various stakeholders of the higher education sector in Cape Town as a response to the current wave of student protests at a number of our universities. Present at the meeting were representatives of the universities' chairs of councils, Universities South Africa representing the vice-chancellors, trade union representative and student leadership from the South African Union of Students and government. The purpose of the meeting was to explore ways and means of addressing the funding situation of our higher education system and craft a common approach for finding solutions specifically to fees and fee increases. The meeting took place on the back of a very successful higher education summit, which concluded on Saturday, the 17th of October, and covered a number of issues, part of which covered the funding at the higher education system and student fees. The summit has resolutions that are short-term and long-term, which the various stakeholders will pursue, and these will bring about long-term solutions to the structural challenges that engulf the higher education system. In other words, the summit laid a good foundation for the sector to deal with the enduring challenges of our higher education system. The stakeholders agreed to encourage their respective constituencies to engage in institutional negotiations at universities with a view to achieve a fee increase of not higher than a CPI-related increase of 6% for 2016. The department will partner institutions to enable this process by providing financial support in this regard. A task team of all stakeholders will be immediately initiated with a view to provide a report on the establishment of a more sustainable fee regime that also recognizes the importance of input variables such as the university subsidy from government and higher education cost drivers. The representatives encourage their constituencies to create an enabling condition or environment for the immediate resumption of the academic program in our institutions. The representatives recognize the right to protest and the importance of difference of opinion in a university. They also underscored the importance of peaceful protest and the respect of constitutional rights of all parties, including those who decide not to protest and who hold different views. The representatives condemn all acts of violence and the violation of the rights of others, including preventing access and exit to institutions, preventing teaching and learning and the operations of the universities, and acts of humiliation. The violation of these rights undermine a safe and secure institutional environment within our universities and must be resisted at all costs. We also recognize the importance of cooperative governance, which requires sustained engagements with all constituencies, and that involves give and take and leads to the productive outcomes for all sides. This requires the enhancement of the skills of leaders of all stakeholders, and the department will assist to facilitate such development. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Minister. On that session now, I'll just allow, I can see, and then already we are itching. Let me start with the two hands. There's a third hand there. I'm hoping that the Minister and the panel also, depending on the nature of the question, will get liberty to respond on the question. If I can start, ladies first.
Marianne Merton, independent newspapers. To the student representative, sorry, I don't know your first name before. And to Professor Habib representing universities, will you actually be able to sell this to the students? Because particularly with reference to bids, this seems to be a worse deal for the students than what happened initially offered by the Bids Council, which was no upfront payment for student fees next year. But the bottom line is, will you be able to sell this to the students?
Thank you.
No, let's just take a set here.
Thank you. Jan Janjeberg for the Sunday Times. My questions are more process related. Firstly, on a CPI-related increase of only 6%, how do you propose implementing that, given that the fees had already been set for next year? What impact does that have on the process going forward for next year and the year after, if such an ad hoc decision can be taken? Secondly, you would know that the inflation, the academic inflation, because the fact, and you refer to it in your statement, that the input variables are sort of lower than they should be. In real terms, actually, the subsidy is going backward. So, how do you propose dealing with academic inflation, like for instance pay rises to keep our academics pay competitive, if you're going to pin it down in such a way? You're going to, in the end up with universities who in real terms are becoming poorer. Thirdly, the issue of registration fees are not dealt with in your statement as far as I could see. Marianne referred to it. This is a massive problem every year, and if on the one hand you stand firm on it, you're going to have a problem in February. If not, you're going to have a problem in June, because payment has to be done. Fourth, what is the decision taken today, which is an ad hoc decision, which clearly doesn't go further than the now and the present? What impact does that have on process for setting fees in the future? Fifth, we can see that that clearly this is to do with access. But how do you combat the evils which we have seen, especially in our continent, but also worldwide, of massification, if you're going to have this kind of decision on fees? And finally, the minister I saw at the Higher Education Summit came out strongly in favour of differentiation. What impact is this going to have on differentiation in our tertiary sector?
Okay. Yeah, I will conclude with you.
My name is Bulilani from SABC. My question is to Professor Habib, as well as perhaps maybe the Minister can respond to it. This kind of agreement, how does it impact at all on the institutional control of the universities?
Thank you.
To the Minister. Minister, I understand that you will be meeting with the President, or you've already met with him. What have you discussed? What came out? If you're still going to meet with him, what are you going to discuss with him about the current situation?
Thank you. Let's take that as a conclusion of the first round. I will allow for responses. If there's any follow-up, we will then sum up on the basis of that.
Yeah, maybe let me start so that then we can shift the microphones to the other panelists. I think maybe the issue of the impact of 6% on the budgets can best be answered by the Vice Chancellors, other than to say that this will require, of course, planning, but also we've committed that the difference we will both seek to raise money for, both the universities and the department, to be able to deal with the shortfall. Of course, this is only for 2016, as you say, just to deal with the immediate problem. Then in our statement, we make it clear that we're going to establish a task team that's then going to look at the whole issue of fees and fee increases in particular. That will report back or come back with its proposals in 6 months' time. That is then that will deal with now 2017, if you like, and beyond, which is fees in the future. I don't necessarily think that this will have an impact in terms of our commitments to differentiation. It may actually, in a way, facilitate that as universities themselves look at streamlining their own problems. Bulelani, I always face this problem, especially from some of the opposition parties. If there is a problem at a university or at universities, and I sit back and do nothing, people say, where is Blade? You know, Nzimande has disappeared. If I act, I often get accused of interference by the same forces. There is nothing we have imposed here. This proposal, in fact, emerged from the discussions by the stakeholders themselves. So we had not come with a piece of paper to actually say it arose out of discussions and engagement. So it's owned by all of us. It's not something that is just that came with the department. Look, the discussions I had with the president, I was briefing him, in fact, about what appears to be the outcome of this meeting, so that the president is aware, and also, of course, to discuss with the president what are potential implications for government arising out of this agreement that we've reached. That's all that we discussed.
Okay. Marianne, you raised the question about this being a worse-off deal. I don't understand how, actually. In fact, I think it's a much better deal. What this says, effectively, is what we are going to do is what, as a collective of stakeholders, we are saying we're going to open up the processes of institutional negotiation. And the goal of that institutional negotiation must not be higher than a CPI-related 6% increase. That's what it says. That we're opening up and creating a framework for that to happen. And for that to happen, the university sector and the department are going to come together to enable that to happen. that doesn't close off the issue of the upfront and registration fee. There might be 3 or 4 or 5 other items that each institution, some of them will put up the issue of upfront fee and registration fee. In other cases, there might be other kinds of issues that might be put onto the table. This is simply creating an enabling environment for a 26 or 27 institutional negotiations to actually happen. And so I think it's a very productive way going forward, and it enables at least the possibility of finding some solutions to the challenges that we have had in the last couple of days. So in Witz's case, I would imagine we'd start negotiations. This should be enough to prompt negotiations to happen. We know where our goal is for our fee increase, and there might be other things like the registration fee, etc., that we'll tackle at an institutional level and address at an institutional level. The impact, I think, is an important question, but I do think that the impact, if it had only been borne by the university, then it would have a dramatic impact. What we're saying openly is that it's going to be a partnership between the university and the department, and we're going to be able to mitigate the impact in productive ways. And as the Minister says, if you think through the differentiation logic of it, it might be even conducive to enabling the development of the system in the ways that is intended and in strategic directions. 2017 onwards is a sustainable, this is for 2016. For 2017 onwards, we're going to effectively, through a cooperative governance process, develop a sustainable fee regime that looks at both input variables like cost drivers, that will look at the subsidy, and that I presume when the report comes up in 6 months, we'll then get involved in the debates and the deliberations and all of the processes around this. And then finally, the issue of institutional autonomy. The system works on the principle of cooperative governance. And the principle of cooperative governance recognizes, on the one hand, that institutions are free to make their decisions, but that the system is stewarded. And that principle of stewarding means that there is an ongoing interaction between department and institutions on how to make sure that the system as a whole achieves productive outcomes. Now, we already have, for instance, on a fairly regular basis, interactions around enrollment plans. That's the principle of cooperative governance. And so it seems to me that this fits into the principle of cooperative governance, because what we are saying is there is a challenge. That challenge is about the fee for 2016. We are having an engagement. We've established a set of principles. The final decision is still left to the institutions, but we are saying to you, you can actually, here's a goal to be directed to. And if you go to that goal and are directed to and achieve them, and there are consequences, then you can come to us and we can engage on how to mitigate those consequences. That's what I see as cooperative governance. I don't see it as a problem of institutional autonomy in any way. I think it's a very useful way, actually, of getting a managed system in a way that works in the interests of the country as a whole, but that also respects the academic freedom and the decision-making autonomy of institutions itself. Thanks.
You don't want to just temporarily swap with the...
We had swap before.
So that he's closer to
my
the
Vice Chancellor.
Yes, and he's Vice Chancellor.
We're in the middle of a strike. So.
We are dominated by VC.
Look, let me start by saying that going into the discussions, the position has not moved. The students can call on the government to implement the 2007 Polokwane resolution on free education for the poor still stands. I don't think students are in any way disillusioned to that. And that is what in the long and in the medium and the long run we have said, we've even shared in the meeting. And I think it's fair that we report to that. The position throughout the country is also fees must fall. We are unwavering about that. We are uncompromising about that. And that is the position of students. But how, that being said, the discussions around here, which students have advanced around issues from moratorium or fees, from all of these discussions, have come to where we're saying that as we're about to start engaging in negotiations, we must in principle agree that it must not go above CPI, which is a 6%. That is the negotiations, and that's in good faith what we're saying student leaders and everyone must consider. But we've shared that the demand is still strong for 0% increase. But that as we start engagements in good faith, there's this commitment that's been made by the government and that has been made by vice chancellors, and we're saying, let's go back to the drawing board and see what must happen. We can't guarantee what the direction will be, and we shouldn't, because power lies within the institutions, and collectively we've got the difficult task of going back and saying this is the position for now in 2016, as we try to realize what we ought to be realizing. But what is the conversation that we must have to ensure that we can make sure that students from working class backgrounds and our parents don't suffer from that. So those were the engagements that we're having collectively around the issue of reaching negotiation and speaking on CPI at 6.
Thank you very much. Andy, you want to also make a follow-up?
I will say that.
Okay. No, that's fine. Yeah, I see you want to make a follow-up also. Okay.
My name is Andy Siwemagina from City Press. It's just 2 questions of clarity. I would like to find out how many vice chancellors did you have in this meeting today, and does this resolution apply to all institutions across the country, this 6% increase? Secondly, my question to Table 4, where did you get the mandate to commit yourself to what you committed yourself to today? Because when the rumors of 6% started coming out, student leaders have said, we don't want 6%, we'll remain with 0. And you to agree. Where did you get the mandate?
Thank you. Okay.
Just piggyback on that last question to Minister and Professor Happy. What if maybe students on the ground reject this proposal? What happens?
Thank you. Sir, our country is running a budget deficit as it is. Tomorrow is the medium-term budget policy statement. Are we going to see these negotiations reflected in the medium-term budget policy statement? I just can't see where the money's going to come from.
Okay. Yeah.
What's your name? Hi. I would like to know, what role are you going to play to ensure that violence does not escalate? And will be a part of these discussions? And to the Minister, you spoke to the President, as you've said. What was his response?
Okay. No, thanks. Maybe let's start with so that we just go in that sequence.
Thanks. Look, our own understanding, let me start with the mandate one. Our own understanding is that this was an ad hoc stakeholder engagement. This is but a proposal that must go back after the discussions of the national teams, that must go back to constituencies. So I don't think any of the student leaders who are here have agreed, or any on behalf of others. People must still go back to their respective universities and say, this is what is possible. Do you agree? Do you not agree? What is it that we can do? The money issue that you are raising, where are we going to get the money? Look, the argument of student leaders is that higher education must be prioritized, and we've shared this as a collective with the Minister and with the Vice Chancellors. There's a commitment from their side. I don't want to speak about the figures, to go look for that money, and we've said it's a commitment that must be made. We can't delay it. I think if we want to have a conversation of where we're going to get the money, we in our view believe that we've got a crisis that's going on. So I don't think we're going to accept an argument around the issue of the money one. The violence, what we're going to do, look, we had a lengthy discussion around that in the committee. We've accepted that both vice chancellors and students must go reflect. They raised the issues of how they felt we were violent. We responded back by where we felt that the state was repressive in terms of how they dealt with our students. So so we've said that you can't just say violence was in relation to just students. It's the culture of protest that we must go back and we must look at. We have come out strongly against the demolition of property, and we've said let's maintain the non-violent protest that we've been seeing throughout the couple of days. And I think student leaders have done that. They've shown that they can show a good cause with non-violence, and the last couple of days have shown us that. But we've said let's maintain it like that, the issue of non-violence protest, and raising the issue of access into higher learning institutions.
Well, let me start off with how many VCs we are. University South Africa was represented by the EXCO of University South Africa. There were at least another 3 vice-chancellors who've left because they had to catch planes. But there are 2 other vice-chancellors here. Professor Iron Rensburg has just left, and Sizwe Mabazela from Rhodes University, and I'm sure that both of them would be willing to supplement any of the stuff that I'm talking about. There was the question about, do I speak for all of the vice-chancellors? The EXCO represents all of the vice-chancellors in between board meetings. But what we've said is, and we don't pretend to speak for every institution, the decision-making of what the fees are going to be the decisions of the councils of each of the institutions. All that we are doing from here is we're saying we came together as a collection of stakeholders, and we are saying that this is a possible route to resolving it. And we are saying that this is what we would encourage you. We encourage all of you to open up institutional negotiations, and we encourage you to target this as a goal. And if there are consequences and impacts on your institution, let's talk with the department and find a collegiate solution to the challenge. And that, I think, is an encouragement to all of the institutions. I can tell you now that as Wits University, we will probably take it up, as will, and it's something, a message that my chair of council, Randall Carolison, and I will articulate to our council, and then we will engage, and I'm sure that that would be the message that would go from many of our vice-chancellors. On the issues of whether the students reject it, that is always possible. But then the issue is we must engage. We have to engage them. We have to look at alternative solutions that they put under the table. Our urgent necessity, I keep saying, and I've said before and I say again, is to get the academic program on track. You'll see this statement makes that very clear. Our singular focus today should be to get the academic program on track, because examinations, some places we've started examinations, in others examinations in 10 or 12 days, and it would be really horrendous for the system, horrendous for poor people in this country, and horrendous for the possibilities of inclusive development in addressing our challenges if our students were impacted upon negatively in the examinations as a result of this. So we're pulling all stops to focus on finding a quick resolution to this, to getting the academic program on track, and then resolving the remaining issues as the days go by. On violence, we were quite categoric that violence cannot be tolerated, and that violence is not simply the physical act of hurting somebody, but it's also the emotional act of violating their rights in one form or the other. Acts of humiliation, we feel, are not acceptable. Preventing people from moving in and out are not acceptable, and this statement makes that, and we were very clear about it. To be fair to the students, they had committed that they are committed to non-violence, that they are committed to the principle of non-violence, and they raised some concerns from their side, and we had a long debate on how we could address this. And then finally, prioritization. I think Taboho's right. Absolutely, we have to prioritize higher education in a significant way. Clearly, we're in a difficult period in the history of this country, in the economy, and where the global economy is at this moment. And we have to do, a number of things need to happen. If we are going to be serious about creating inclusive development and creating a society that works for all, then and addressing inequality in our society, then education and higher education has to be at the core of it. And to do that, we need resources, We need to create an enabling environment, and we need to ensure that the quality of our program is retained. It's no use getting access for poor students and then not giving them a quality education. Poor students are entitled to a world-class education as much as all other students are. And therefore, I think we must retain that. And so I think it's going to be required. You asked the question, how are you going to pay for it? I think it's going to require by clever spending within the institutions. I think it's going to require prioritization within the institutions. I think it's going to require some new money, and we have raised that with government, and government is looking at that, and they are thinking about that. It's going to require reprioritization by government itself. But I also think that it requires other stakeholders to come to the party. I think it requires the private sector to come to the party. I mean, we spend an enormous amount of money on bursaries in this country, by corporates, by individuals. If we can think through how to spend that money more cleverly, we could maximize impact in quite significant ways. So I do think that one of the fundamental ways in addressing this is it's not impossible to resolve. But I do think we could go a long way if we all start singing from the same hymn sheet. And I think that that needs to be government, it needs to be university executives and management, it needs to be students, I think it needs to be the private sector, I think it needs to be the public sector more generally. And I think if we all come together, we can address this challenge, but address this challenge in a way that contributes to us building the country and achieving the kinds of constitutional objectives that we have prioritized in our constitution. Thank you.
I think that most of the questions actually have been answered, but let me not repeat and just focus on touching on those that were asked of me. I agree entirely with Professor Habib on answering the question of what if these are rejected. Remember when we closed, when I closed the summit on Saturday, last Saturday, I urged that on this matter of fees, we urge all the parties to be willing to compromise in the interests of both the system as well as in the interests of students. We're all sympathetic with the high cost. University of education is expensive. That is why government has the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, at least to relieve poor students. But in all conflict situations, there is often always the necessity to compromise, that you do not get, no party gets 100% of what it wants. Otherwise, if we approach things that way, we will never be able to resolve any of the problems that face us. And the Vice Chancellors have not said this, that for instance, fees from students amount to 22 billion rand. Am I right?
In the system.
In the system. That's a huge amount of money. Of course, poor students, we try to protect them from that. So if you say zero, you are actually saying, let's wipe off the system, 22 billion rands. Also, what must be borne in mind, that's why I would really urge the students to seriously consider this compromise, whilst then we start this other process of looking 2017 and beyond. To seriously take this offer in the interests of the system, particularly as Professor Habib is saying, now that the examinations are around the corner. We cannot, as a country, really afford not to have examinations written on time. We are already concerned about the possible impact of the loss of days for academic work. So that is our appeal, that let the parties find each other around this compromise. Yan, as to where the money is going to come from, it's not an easy question that. We will have to look and look. We'll have to look possibly inside our own budget as the department. But also it does not mean that we will not continue to appeal to the government fiscus to see where we can find this money. You are right, there is no money sitting there set aside. But we will have to look, including reprioritization possibly, in order to be able to assist in this process. What was the President's response? The President expressed relief that at least there seems to be possibly some light at the end of the tunnel, because the parties have come up with a framework which provide for a compromise. The President, by the way, is a very skilled and highly experienced negotiator. So he understands that it's important. I can't speak for the President, but he understands that it is important that the parties find each other so that we can stabilize the situation in our universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was I want to close, and I could see that these are new hands. I want to really close after that and really not open. Unfortunately, some of the panel are rushing to airports. They are more out of the promise. So if you can be succinct and then we close, so that you don't accuse me of suppressing you. Just those two hands.
Thanks very much, Rebecca from Daily Maverick. Can I just ask if there's any comment on the use of police against student protests? Thanks.
Okay. Yes.
Just a quick question, LaRue from Media 24. Just a comment from the Minister. I heard this morning on television an analyst saying, the students shouldn't be protesting in front of the universities, they should be protesting in front of the union buildings. What is your reaction to that in the light of this statement?
Thank you.
Yeah, well, let me start so that I will then shift this. Well, I don't know what to say in relation to that, I can't decide for students as to where students actually protest or plan to protest. We live in a democracy. Everybody has a right to organize a protest, provided it's peaceful. So that's somebody's view, it's not mine. So I can't speak for the students. I finished my full-time university studies in 1982. I'm no longer a student.
I think on the policing one, just 2 points. It was one of the big discussions that came out of today's thing, and the student leaders were raising the issue of the violence that we have seen. You will have seen clips from students who were studying outside WITS and they were dragged. And that was exactly why in the discussion around student protests, we said you must not articulate violence from just the perspective of what you're seeing by students. You must understand it and contextualize it, particularly when the state uses repressive violence. And we pleaded with the stakeholders from interdict issues, from issues of disciplinary hearings, that they must be sensitive to that issue in particular. And look, from our side, this is but a ad hoc discussion that happened. The reality is that the consultation, VC's Professor Abib must still go back and he must still go present this with the chairperson of Randall to the WITS University. And that's where the discussion really does lie. It doesn't lie in this forum. At best, we can try to say how do we ensure that better access for everyone within the system, how do we ensure that we cap and regulate fees, but the discussions must still go back to our institutions of higher learning.
Thanks. Thank you very much. This concludes our media briefing. Thank you very much for your quick response.
We need the guys.
But we need to bring this negotiation back.
We need to try to do that, yes. But I'm saying we're not going to get it if it doesn't come with other things that we're trying to do. Of course, concessions that we've made before around concessions that you're going to make around disciplinary. I can tell you now.
Done disciplinary.
Sorry to interrupt, we just need your surname urgently.
To tell her T-H-O-T-H-E-L-A.
Teboho Totela.
Yes.
And your position?
Deputy President.
Deputy of?
South African Union of Students.
South African.